The smell of barbecue smoke hung heavy in the humid North Carolina air, a familiar comfort that usually signaled pure joy. Family, laughter, the clinking of iced tea glasses. That was Grandpa's annual 4th of July cookout. But this year, a single question shattered the illusion, twisting my stomach into knots tighter than any grill tongs could manage. Grandpa, bless his oblivious heart, looked at me, a twinkle in his eye, and asked, "Still enjoying that car I got you, sweetheart?" My mother, standing beside him, her usual serene smile plastered on her face, didn't miss a beat. Before I could even formulate a reply, before the betrayal could fully register on my own face, she chimed in, her voice sweet as pecan pie. "Oh, she absolutely adores it, Dad. Drives it everywhere." Her arm snaked around my waist, a possessive gesture that felt less like affection and more like a warning. I felt a cold dread spread through me, chilling me despite the sweltering heat. The truth, a venomous secret I'd carried for months, threatened to spill out right there, amidst the potato salad and grilled hot dogs. This wasn't just about a car. This was about a decade of carefully constructed lies, a lifetime of manipulation, and a shocking discovery that ripped open the fabric of my family. What I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It's a blueprint for understanding how the people closest to you can become your greatest adversaries, and how sometimes true justice demands a price you never imagined paying. For years, I was the dutiful daughter, the quiet one, always trying to earn a crumb of affection from my perpetually busy, seemingly perfect mother. I watched her effortlessly charm everyone, from the ladies at her book club to the toughest real estate agents in Charlotte. She was a master of appearances, a living, breathing Southern belle archetype, and I, her awkward, introverted daughter, always felt like a shadow in her dazzling light. My father, a kind but often absent man, was too immersed in his engineering career to notice the subtle currents of tension that flowed beneath our picture-perfect surface. He just saw a happy family, a loving wife, and a daughter who, by all accounts, was doing just fine. He never saw the resentment simmering inside me, the quiet rage that built brick by brick with every dismissive glance, every backhanded compliment, every suggestion that felt like a command. The car, a shiny new convertible, was supposed to be my graduation gift from college. Grandpa, always generous to a fault, had promised it to me for years. It was a symbol of freedom, of a new chapter, of finally escaping the suffocating expectations of my childhood home. I remember the day he handed me the keys, his eyes crinkling with pride. My mother was there too, her smile wider than I'd ever seen it, almost as if the car was for her. I brushed it off then, just another one of her quirks. But the quirks grew stranger. The car, my car, was always unavailable. "Oh, honey, I just needed to run to the grocery store," she'd say, keys jingling. Or the mechanic needed to look at something. I dropped it off. Each excuse, seemingly innocent, chipped away at my trust, leaving me stranded, reliant on rides, feeling like a teenager again instead of a newly minted college graduate ready to conquer the world. The resentment festered, turning into a bitter knot in my chest. I felt like a pawn in a game I didn't understand, constantly being moved, manipulated, and denied what was rightfully mine. Then came the phone call, a desperate whisper from a distant relative, a second cousin I barely knew, who had no idea the earthquake she was about to unleash. "Heard you got that new car, honey. Your mom told us all about it. Said she bought it herself, a little treat for all her hard work." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. My mother, she bought it herself? That was impossible. Grandpa had promised me that car for years, had even shown me the exact model he planned to get. This wasn't just a white lie. This was a deliberate, calculated deception designed to steal my joy, my independence, and my grandfather's generosity. That phone call ignited an obsession. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every conversation with my mother felt like a performance, every interaction a lie. I started digging, subtly at first, then with a frantic desperation. Bank statements, old emails, credit card bills. I scoured everything, piecing together a puzzle far more sinister than I could have imagined. And what I found, hidden in plain sight, was a pattern of betrayal so deep, so ingrained, it made my blood run cold. It wasn't just the car. It was the college tuition loans she'd taken out in my name, the inheritance from my grandmother that had mysteriously vanished, the carefully crafted narrative of my life that served only one purpose: to elevate her, to diminish me. She wasn't just a little manipulative, she was a master architect of deceit, building her perfect life on a foundation of my stolen opportunities. My heart pounded as I pieced together the final, damning evidence, a single document that would expose everything. I knew then that the 4th of July barbecue, the one place where family was supposed to feel safe, would become the battleground for my reckoning. I didn't know how I would do it, but I knew I had to expose her, to reclaim my truth, and to finally shatter her perfect facade. What happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for our entire family, proving that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't about hurting someone back, but about revealing their true self to the world. You won't believe the lengths she went to, or the explosive way it all came crashing down. The smell of grilled burgers and lighter fluid always meant one thing: Grandpa's annual 4th of July barbecue. For years it was my favorite day. This year it felt like a countdown to an explosion. My name is Alex. I'm a pretty straightforward guy, or at least I used to be. I believe in hard work, honesty, and that what goes around comes around. Lately, that last part has become less of a belief and more of a desperate prayer. I walked through the familiar backyard, past the inflatable pool where my younger cousins splashed, and the picnic tables laden with potato salad and watermelon. Every laugh, every carefree shout, grated on my nerves. I could feel the tension building in my chest, a tight knot that had been forming for months. It started subtly, a nagging feeling, then grew into a consuming fire. My eyes found him immediately. Uncle Robert. He stood by the grill, flipping patties with a theatrical flourish, his booming laugh echoing across the yard. He was the picture of success, the self-made man, the one everyone admired. To me, he was a thief, not the kind who breaks into houses, but the kind who steals dreams, who pilfers futures. It had been almost a year since the incident, but the memory was as fresh and raw as a new wound. I'd poured everything into my startup, a tech venture focused on sustainable energy solutions. Years of late nights, ramen noodles for dinner, and sacrificing every ounce of social life. I'd finally secured a meeting with a major venture capitalist firm, a meeting that could have changed everything. The night before, I'd shared my pitch deck, my meticulously crafted business plan, with Uncle Robert. He was family, after all, and he'd always offered advice, however unsolicited. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. The meeting the next day was a disaster. The VCs listened politely, but their eyes glazed over. They kept mentioning concepts and phrases that sounded eerily similar to my own, but slightly off, as if someone had taken my detailed blueprint and tried to redraw it from memory. The meeting ended with a polite but firm rejection. I left feeling utterly deflated, confused. A week later, the news broke. A new sustainable energy startup had just secured a massive funding round. Their founder? Uncle Robert. He'd launched his company with a pitch almost identical to mine, only polished, perfected, and presented with a confidence I hadn't yet fully mastered. He'd stolen my idea, my intellectual property, my entire future, and spun it into his own golden parachute. My world imploded. The years of effort, the sacrifices, the dreams, all reduced to ashes. I confronted him, of course. His eyes, usually so jovial, hardened into cold, unreadable stones. He denied everything, feigned ignorance, and even offered a condescending pat on my shoulder, telling me to learn from this kid. It's a tough world out there. The sheer audacity of it, the blatant disregard for my work, fueled a burning resentment inside me. My parents, bless their hearts, tried to mediate. They saw a misunderstanding, a family squabble. They couldn't grasp the depth of the betrayal, the way it had hollowed me out. "He's family, Alex," my mom would plead. "You can't just throw that away." But how do you reconcile with someone who has systematically dismantled your life's work? How do you forgive a betrayal so profound it feels like a physical injury? The barbecue was the first time I'd seen Uncle Robert since that confrontation. He looked even more prosperous, his smile wider, his clothes more expensive. He embodied everything I now despised. The rage simmered beneath my skin, a constant low-frequency hum. I wanted to scream, to expose him, to shatter his carefully constructed facade of success. But I knew that wouldn't work. He was too good at playing the victim, at twisting narratives. I watched him, a silent predator in a crowded room. My initial despair had slowly morphed into something else, something harder, colder. It was a singular focus, an unyielding determination. I wasn't interested in just getting my idea back. I wanted more. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain he'd inflicted on me. I wanted justice, not just for my stolen invention, but for the stolen years, the stolen trust, the stolen future. My mom, sensing my dark mood, came over, her brow furrowed with concern. "Alex, are you okay? You seem a million miles away." I forced a weak smile. "Just tired, Mom. Long week." She nodded, though her eyes lingered on me, searching. She didn't know the extent of the battle raging inside me. She didn't know that beneath the surface of her quiet sun, a storm was brewing, a calculated plan forming. The air was thick with the smell of grilling meat and the unspoken tension that only I seemed to feel. Every casual glance from Uncle Robert, every hearty laugh he shared with my dad, felt like a deliberate taunt. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd gotten away with it. He had no idea that his victory was temporary, that I was just biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The barbecue was just beginning, but for me, the game had already started. And I was playing to win. The aroma of charcoal and sizzling meat, usually comforting, now felt suffocating. Every familiar face, every warm greeting, felt like a spotlight on my internal turmoil. I plastered on a smile, a practiced mask I'd perfected over the past year, ever since that meeting, that betrayal. The VC's polite dismissal, their almost imperceptible smirks, had haunted my nights. They hadn't just rejected my idea, they'd heard a bastardized version of it, a hollow echo of my vision. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, who had fed it to them. Uncle Robert, my own flesh and blood, had taken my blueprint for a brighter future and twisted it into something unrecognizable, something he could claim as his own. He hadn't just stolen my intellectual property, he'd stolen my belief in trust, in family. The initial shock had given way to a quiet, simmering rage. I spent weeks replaying every conversation, every seemingly innocuous question he'd asked about my startup, dissecting his feigned interest, his subtle probing. Each memory was a fresh cut, deepening the wound. The resentment festered, growing into an obsession. I wasn't just angry, I was consumed by the need for justice, for him to pay for what he'd done. He was still by the grill, holding court, surrounded by a laughing audience. My dad, oblivious, clapped him on the shoulder, praising his grilling prowess. A sharp pang of envy, laced with disgust, twisted in my gut. How easily he charmed them. How effortlessly he wore the mask of the benevolent patriarch. He was a master manipulator, and I, foolishly, had been his easiest mark. I watched him, a predator observing his prey, noting his mannerisms, his confident posture, the way he held his head high. He exuded an air of untouchable success, a success built on my shattered dreams. My plan, meticulously crafted over months, was finally ready. I hadn't just been moping, I'd been preparing. I'd spent countless hours researching, networking, building new alliances in secret. The key was to hit him where it hurt the most, to dismantle his carefully constructed facade piece by piece. just as he had dismantled mine. The barbecue was the perfect stage. A public forum where his humiliation would be amplified, where everyone who admired him would witness his true colors. I moved through the crowd, exchanging pleasantries, my eyes constantly tracking Robert. He was oblivious, lost in his self-congratulatory bubble. He was due for a rude awakening. My heart hammered against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about proving that integrity still mattered. He thought he had outsmarted me, but he had underestimated the fire he'd ignited. A few minutes later, my mom, ever the social butterfly, spotted me. "Robert, darling, you made it!" she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. My name, spoken so warmly, felt like a jolt. She called me Robert, too, a constant reminder of the confusion that often arose at family gatherings. It was a small, inconsequential detail, but today, it grated on me, a symbol of how easily identities could be blurred, how easily one could be mistaken for another. I forced a smile, returning her embrace. "Of course, Mom. Wouldn't miss Grandpa's barbecue." She beamed, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. "Go say hi to your uncle." "He's just finished the first batch of burgers." My uncle, the man who had stolen my future, was now being offered up for pleasantries. The irony was almost unbearable, but I nodded, my gaze flicking to the grill. "I will," I promised, a silent vow that the greeting wouldn't be quite what she expected. The air grew thick with tension, at least for me. Every step towards the grill felt heavy, laden with the weight of expectation, of past grievances, of future retribution. I could see the glint in his eye as he noticed me approaching, a subtle flicker of triumph. He probably thought I was coming to congratulate him, to admire his latest conquest. He had no idea I was coming to collect. My pulse quickened. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for, planning for, dreaming of. The stage was set, the audience was gathered, and the protagonist, the unwitting villain of my story, was completely unprepared for the curtain call. The casual chatter, the clinking of glasses, the laughter of children. It all faded into a dull roar as I drew closer to Uncle Robert. He turned, a wide, confident smile plastered on his face, a perfect picture of contentment. He had no idea that his world was about to be rocked, that his carefully constructed empire was about to crumble. I was no longer just a nephew, I was an avenging angel, and he was about to face his judgment. He gestured broadly with his spatula, a puff of charcoal smoke momentarily obscuring his face. "Robert, my boy, good to see you. Still enjoying that car I got you?" His voice boomed, cutting through the backyard chatter, designed to draw attention, to highlight his generosity. My mother, standing beside him, beamed, her hand resting affectionately on his arm. She opened her mouth to answer for me, a practiced gesture honed over years of deflecting my awkwardness, or, more recently, my simmering resentment. But I cut her off, my voice surprisingly steady, even to my own ears. "The car's fine, Uncle Robert," I said, my gaze locked onto his. "Though, to be honest, I've been thinking a lot about investments lately, specifically venture capital." His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a tiny tremor in his composure that only I seemed to notice. He chuckled, a little too loud, a little too forced. "Ah, yes, venture capital, a fascinating world. Very volatile, though. High risk, high reward, as they say." He tried to pivot, to steer the conversation back to safer ground, back to the narrative he controlled. "Speaking of rewards, these burgers are almost ready. Who's hungry?" But I wasn't letting him off the hook, not today. "It's funny, isn't it?" I continued, stepping closer, lowering my voice just enough to make him lean in, to make it feel like a private confession in the midst of a public celebration. "How some people just seem to have a knack for spotting a good idea, almost before anyone else, like they have a sixth sense for innovation." He shifted his weight, his eyes darting around, searching for an escape route, a distraction. My mother, sensing the shift in the air, began to nervously adjust the platter of hot dog buns. The easygoing atmosphere of the barbecue was subtly, imperceptibly cracking. "Indeed," Robert said, clearing his throat. "It's about vision, Robert, and execution. You need to be ruthless in this business." He emphasized the word ruthless, a glint in his eye, a subtle warning. He was reminding me of his power, his dominance. He thought he was intimidating me. He had no idea he was fueling my fire. "Ruthless, yes," I agreed, a slow smile spreading across my face, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Or perhaps just well-informed. Imagine someone, say, a family member, who gets access to a brilliant pitch deck, full of groundbreaking ideas. They see the potential. They recognize the genius. And then, I paused, letting the silence hang, heavy with unspoken accusation. They decide to execute on those ideas themselves. Robert's face tightened. The color drained from his cheeks, replaced by a sickly pallor. The confident bluster was gone, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He knew I knew. The air around us seemed to thicken, the festive sounds of the party receding into a distant hum. My mother looked from me to Robert, her brow furrowed with confusion and dawning apprehension. "Robert, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "Your uncle has always been so supportive of your ventures." I turned to her, my smile softening, a stark contrast to the hard edge in my voice when I spoke to Robert. Mom, Uncle Robert was incredibly supportive. So supportive, in fact, that he helped me refine my pitch for the venture capitalists last year. "Remember that big meeting I had? The one that went nowhere?" Her eyes widened, a memory clicking into place. She remembered my crushing disappointment, the weeks I spent holed up in my apartment, defeated. Robert, meanwhile, stood frozen, his hand still gripping the spatula, his knuckles white. The sizzling of the burgers seemed deafening in the sudden quiet that had fallen around us. And then, just a few months later, I continued, turning back to Robert, my voice a low, dangerous growl. A new company suddenly emerges, making waves in sustainable energy. A company with a surprisingly familiar business model, a strikingly similar product, and a name that sounds suspiciously like a variation of my original concept. I leaned in closer, my voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the weight of years of suppressed rage. A company, Uncle Robert, that just secured a multi-million-dollar investment from the very same VC firm that ghosted me. His jaw worked, but no words came out. He looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting wildly. The mask had finally cracked, revealing the ugly truth beneath. The man who had always projected an image of effortless success, of benevolent generosity, was now exposed. The ruthless businessman was nothing more than a thief. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The realization was hitting her, a tidal wave of betrayal. The cheerful barbecue, the symbol of family togetherness, had become the stage for an uncomfortable, undeniable truth. The judgment I had promised was beginning, and Robert was standing directly in its path. He had underestimated me, had believed my silence was acceptance. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp that still managed to escape as a choked sound. Her eyes, usually so warm and full of laughter, were now wide with a dawning horror, fixed on Robert. It was as if a sudden, brutal spotlight had been thrown on a hidden corner of our family, exposing something ugly and undeniable. The cheerful barbecue, the symbol of family togetherness, had become the stage for an uncomfortable, undeniable truth. The judgment I had promised was beginning, and Robert was standing directly in its path. He had underestimated me, had believed my silence was acceptance. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. A hush fell over the immediate area, the playful shouts of the kids by the pool suddenly seeming distant, muffled. My Uncle Robert still held the spatula aloft, a half-cooked burger sizzling on the grill, but his usual boisterous confidence seemed to deflate. His smile, usually so ready and expansive, faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion, then something darker, recognition. He saw the cold, hard certainty in my eyes, the deliberate challenge. He understood, in that agonizing moment, that this wasn't just a casual family gathering anymore. This was an ambush. My voice when I spoke again was calm, almost unnervingly so. It was the calm of a deep ocean before a storm, a surface placidity that hid immense, swirling currents beneath. Actually, Robert, I said, my gaze never leaving his, it's funny you should ask. Because that car, well, it's a constant reminder, isn't it? I let the words hang in the air, thick with unspoken accusations. I saw his jaw tighten, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He was trying to gauge my next move, trying to understand how much I knew, how much I was willing to expose. The comfortable family facade was cracking, and he knew it. A reminder of what exactly, Alex? He managed, his voice a little too loud, a little too forced. He was attempting to regain control, to brush off the uncomfortable silence, but the edge of panic was already creeping in. He glanced around, seeking allies, seeking a way out of the spotlight I had so carefully shone on him. But everyone was watching, mesmerized by the unfolding drama. My mom stood frozen, her eyes darting between Robert and me, her face a canvas of disbelief and pain. A reminder of opportunities, I continued, stepping closer, my voice dropping slightly, forcing him to lean in, to truly hear me. Of trust. Of what happens when those things are misplaced. I saw the color drain from his face. He knew exactly what I was talking about. He knew I wasn't just talking about a car. I was talking about the stolen pitch, the venture capitalist meeting, the dreams he had casually crushed. The memory of that disastrous meeting, the way the VCs had looked at me, as if I were a clueless amateur, still burned. I don't know what you're talking about, Robert blustered, but his eyes betrayed him. They darted nervously, unable to meet mine for more than a second. He was trapped. The web of lies he had spun, the comfortable narrative of his own success, was unraveling thread by thread. It was a gift, a gesture of generosity. You're being ungrateful, Alex. Ungrateful? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. Is that what you call it, Robert? When you take someone's life's work, their passion, their entire future, and present it as your own, is that generosity? My voice rose, cutting through the strained silence. Several more relatives turned, their conversations dying out, their eyes wide with curiosity and concern. This wasn't just family banter. This was something far more serious. My mom finally found her voice, a whisper of a plea. Alex, what are you saying? Robert, what is he talking about? Her voice trembled, a crack in the carefully constructed piece of the barbecue. The tension was a palpable thing, a living entity in the air, making it hard to breathe. I ignored her, my focus solely on Robert. This was my moment. This was the culmination of months of simmering resentment, of sleepless nights replaying the betrayal. I'm talking about the sustainable energy pitch, Robert, I said, each word a hammer blow. The one I shared with you, in confidence, the night before my VC meeting. The one you then conveniently presented as your own to the same firm just weeks later, under a slightly different name. Robert's face was a mask of shock, then anger. That's a ridiculous accusation. I developed my own concepts. You're delusional, he roared, finally finding his footing, attempting to overpower me with volume and indignation. He was trying to turn the tables, to make me out to be the crazy one, the unhinged relative causing a scene. Delusional? I countered, a cold smile touching my lips. Funny, because the venture capitalists seemed to think your concepts were surprisingly similar to mine. So similar, in fact, that when I finally managed to get a second meeting with them, after months of relentless effort, they actually remembered my original pitch. They remembered the details, Robert. Details that only I could have provided. Details that you conveniently forgot to change. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. My mom swayed slightly, clutching her chest. Robert's face was a sickly shade of white. The air crackled with the weight of the revelation. The casual barbecue had transformed into a courtroom, and Robert was on trial. The truth, ugly and undeniable, was finally out. He had nowhere left to hide. The car, the symbol of his supposed generosity, now stood as a monument to his betrayal. The silence that followed Mom's revelation was deafening, broken only by the distant pop of firecrackers. Robert's face, usually so composed, was a mask of disbelief, then a slow dawning horror. He looked from Mom to me, then to the stunned faces of our family, their earlier merriment replaced by a collective gasp. His carefully constructed facade, years in the making, crumbled before my eyes. This wasn't just a family barbecue anymore, it was an unscripted drama. A raw, public reckoning. Aunt Carol, usually the peacemaker, was the first to speak. Her voice, usually soft, was laced with a sharp edge. Obert, is this true? Did you really steal Alex's idea? Robert stammered, his eyes darting frantically. No, of course not. Alex is mistaken. It was a misunderstanding. A simple overlap of ideas. His voice cracked, the booming confidence utterly gone. He looked like a cornered animal, desperate for an escape route that didn't exist. My cousin Mark, who had always looked up to Robert, stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Uncle Robert, Mom just said she heard you on the phone. She heard you talking about the pitch, about setting up your own meeting. His words were a hammer blow, each one chipping away at Robert's crumbling defense. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mark was the one Robert always lectured about integrity. Robert's gaze finally landed on me, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. He tried to muster a smile, a pathetic attempt at charm. Alex, son, you know I'd never intentionally hurt you. We're family. This is all just a big misunderstanding. Let's talk about this later, privately. He reached out as if to put a comforting hand on my shoulder, but I recoiled, the very thought of his touch making my skin crawl. My voice, when it came, was steady, devoid of the tremor I felt inside. There's nothing to talk about privately, Robert. The truth is out. You took my dream, my hard work, and tried to pass it off as your own. You didn't just steal an idea, you stole a future. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. The faces around us were a mix of shock, anger, and dawning realization. The casual barbecue atmosphere had completely evaporated, replaced by an almost tangible tension. My Uncle David, usually quiet, cleared his throat. Robert, you always spoke so highly of Alex's ambition. You encouraged him. To hear this, it's hard to believe. His voice was laced with disappointment, not anger, which somehow felt worse. It was the sound of trust shattering. Robert's eyes darted around, searching for an ally, a friendly face, but found none. Even his wife, Aunt Susan, who had always defended him fiercely, stood silent, her face pale, her gaze fixed on the ground. She knew. She must have known. The thought sent a fresh wave of bitterness through me. How many people had he fooled? How many lives had he manipulated for his own gain? Then a voice from the back cut through the stunned silence. Grandpa. He walked slowly, leaning on his cane, his usually jovial expression replaced by a stern, unreadable look. He stopped directly in front of Robert, his eyes, usually twinkling with mischief, now sharp and penetrating. Robert, Grandpa said, his voice low, a rumble that commanded attention. I asked you earlier if you were still enjoying the car I got you. You didn't answer. Robert swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. Grandpa, please, this isn't the time. Grandpa held up a hand, silencing him. It is precisely the time. That car, Robert, was a gift, a symbol of trust, of family, just like Alex's idea was a gift, a symbol of his hard work and trust in you. Grandpa paused, his gaze unwavering. That car was paid for with the money I earned honestly. Every cent. Did you earn your success honestly, Robert? Or did you build it on the backs of others, on stolen dreams? The question hung in the air, a final, devastating blow. Robert flinched, as if physically struck. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His face was a contorted mess of shame and defeat. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. This was it, the moment I had replayed in my mind countless times, the moment of reckoning. Then, Robert did something I never expected. He turned, not to defend himself, not to deny, but to flee. He pushed past my aunt and uncle, his eyes wide with a desperate, panicked look. He stumbled over a lawn chair, righted himself, and bolted towards the side gate, disappearing around the corner of the house. The sound of his car tires squealing as he sped away was the only farewell. A collective sigh seemed to ripple through the family. The air, once thick with tension, now felt strangely lighter. My mom stepped forward, putting an arm around me, her touch a comforting anchor. The car, the symbol of his supposed generosity, now stood as a monument to his betrayal, but also, in a strange way, to the truth finally revealed. The barbecue was ruined, but something far more valuable had been salvaged. The truth. The truth, raw and unvarnished, hung in the humid air, a stark contrast to the festive chaos that had once defined Grandpa's barbecue. It wasn't just a revelation, it was an exorcism. The suffocating weight I'd carried for months, the gnawing resentment that had eaten at my core, began to lift, replaced by a strange, exhilarating lightness. My mother's arm around me wasn't just comfort. It was a silent affirmation, a reunion of spirits after a long, painful estrangement. She hadn't known the full extent of Robert's deception, but she'd felt the chill, the subtle shift in my demeanor, the way I'd withdrawn into myself. Now the dam had broken. Robert, stripped of his carefully constructed facade, stood there, a pathetic figure. The booming laugh was gone, replaced by a choked gasp. The theatrical gestures had vanished, leaving him with hands that trembled uncontrollably. His face, usually ruddy with assumed authority, was now ashen, drained of all color. The silence that followed his outburst was deafening, punctuated only by the distant squeals of children from the pool, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding just yards away. Then a voice, quiet but firm, cut through the stillness. It was Grandpa. "Robert," he said, his voice laced with a disappointment that stung more than any anger. "Is this true?" Robert looked at him, then at my mom, then at me, his eyes darting frantically, searching for an escape route that didn't exist. He stammered, a pathetic string of half-formed excuses and desperate denials. It's a misunderstanding, Dad. He's exaggerating. He's always been so sensitive." The accusation of sensitivity coming from him was so absurd it almost made me laugh, but the moment was too grave for humor. My mom squeezed my arm, a silent command to remain calm, to let the truth speak for itself, and it did. The story, once confined to the dark corners of my mind, now spilled out, each detail a hammer blow against Robert's crumbling fortress of lies. I recounted the late-night conversation, the shared dreams, the misplaced trust. I spoke of the venture capitalist meeting, the eerily similar pitch, the crushing realization that my dream had been hijacked, twisted, and then presented as someone else's. As I spoke, the faces around me transformed. Confusion turned to understanding, understanding to shock, and shock to a quiet, simmering anger. Aunts and uncles, cousins who had always looked up to Robert, now looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. The air grew thick with unspoken judgment, a collective condemnation that was far more potent than any shouted accusation. Robert shrunk under the weight of it, his shoulders slumping, his gaze fixed on the ground. When I finished, a new silence descended, heavier than before. This wasn't the silence of shock, but the silence of reckoning. Grandpa, his face etched with sorrow, finally spoke. "Robert," he repeated, his voice now devoid of any warmth. "You stole from your own nephew. You betrayed his trust. You betrayed family." Robert finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot, filled with a desperate plea. I was under pressure, Dad. The market was tough. I saw an opportunity." "An opportunity," my mom interjected, her voice sharp, cutting through his pathetic defense. "To profit from your nephew's hard work? To crush his dreams?" He flinched but said nothing. There was nothing to say. The truth was out, laid bare for everyone to see. The barbecue, the symbol of family unity and celebration, had become the unlikely stage for a painful but necessary confrontation. The aroma of grilled food, once so inviting, now seemed tainted, a reminder of the bitter taste of betrayal. I looked at Robert, and for the first time I felt no anger, no resentment. Only a profound sense of pity. He had built his empire on shifting sands, on deceit and opportunism, and now the tide had come in, washing it all away. The car, the ostentatious symbol of his supposed generosity, now stood as a hollow monument to his downfall. It wasn't just a car, it was a lie, a gilded cage designed to trap me in a debt of gratitude I didn't owe. The family slowly dispersed, the festive atmosphere shattered beyond repair. Some offered me quiet words of support, others simply shook their heads in disbelief. Robert remained by the grill, a solitary figure, the charred remains of the burgers a fitting metaphor for the ruin he had wrought. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. My startup had been set back, my trust in family deeply scarred. But something fundamental had shifted. The truth, once a burning ember within me, had been fanned into a roaring flame, illuminating the path forward. I had faced my tormentor, spoken my truth, and in doing so had reclaimed a piece of myself that I thought was lost forever. The bitter taste of revenge had been replaced by the quiet satisfaction of justice, a justice not of retribution, but of revelation. The barbecue was ruined, but something far more valuable had been salvaged, my peace of mind, and the clarity to rebuild, stronger and wiser than before. The silence in the room felt heavier than the humid August air. My mother's smile, that knowing, almost triumphant curve of her lips, was a shield, deflecting Grandpa's question before it could pierce me. He had no idea, not truly, the layers of deceit woven into that seemingly innocent query about the car. The car, a symbol of his misguided generosity, had become the centerpiece of my long-simmering resentment, the very object of my obsession. I watched him, a man I once idolized, now a puppet in a larger, crueler play. The years of feeling overlooked, of my achievements minimized while my cousin Mark's every mediocre step was celebrated, had finally reached their boiling point. The car, a vintage Mustang, a gift from Grandpa, had been the final bitter straw. It was supposed to be mine, a reward for my tireless work on his ranch, a promise whispered in hushed tones over dusty fields. Instead, it had been handed to Mark, a flashy trophy for his latest fleeting success, while I received a pat on the back and a dismissive "better luck next time, son." The betrayal had festered, turning my heart into a hard, cold knot. "It's running beautifully, Grandpa," Mom said, her voice smooth as silk, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "Robert keeps it in pristine condition." Grandpa beamed, oblivious. "That's my boy! Always knew you had a knack for engines." Robert. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. I had spent countless hours in the garage, not just maintaining that car, but meticulously, painstakingly transforming it. Every oil change, every polish, every seemingly innocent adjustment was a step in my carefully orchestrated plan. My obsession had consumed me, turning nights into days, turning every waking thought to the moment of reckoning. Mark, lounging on the porch swing, sipping a cold lemonade, flashed me a condescending grin. "Yeah, Robert's a regular mechanic. Good thing too, considering how much work that old clunker needs." My knuckles tightened around my glass. This was it. The moment I had replayed 1,000 times in my mind. The stage was set, the audience gathered. Actually, Mark, I began, my voice surprisingly steady, that old clunker has a few modifications. Mark scoffed. What? You put a new air freshener in it? A ripple of laughter went through the small family gathering. Mom's hand subtly squeezed my arm, a silent signal of encouragement. Something a little more substantial, I continued, meeting Mark's gaze. You know how much you love showing off that car, especially to your new clients. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease replacing his smugness. What are you talking about? Well, for one, I said, my voice rising just enough to capture everyone's attention, the GPS. I installed a custom one. It doesn't just track your location, Mark. It records every conversation you have inside the car, every single one. A gasp from Aunt Carol. Mark's face went ashen. His lemonade glass clattered to the porch. And the engine, I pressed on, relishing the sudden silence. I replaced the fuel line. Not with a standard one, but with a special high-pressure line designed to, well, let's just say it's not compatible with regular gasoline. You've been putting premium in it, haven't you, Mark? All those trips to impress your clients? His jaw worked, but no words came out. The custom fuel line works perfectly with a specific blend of racing fuel, I explained, my gaze unwavering. But with regular premium, over time it builds up incredible pressure. And today, Mark, after all those miles you've put on it, showing it off, today that pressure is critical. A low murmur spread through the crowd. Grandpa looked bewildered, then a dawning horror crossed his face. What are you saying, Robert? He stammered. I'm saying, I stated, my voice like cold steel, that the moment Mark starts that car and drives away from here, the fuel line will rupture. And when it does, the highly pressurized fuel will ignite. It won't just be an old clunker anymore, Mark. It'll be a bonfire. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant chirping of crickets. Mark's eyes, wide with terror, darted between me and the gleaming Mustang parked innocently in the driveway. The car, once a symbol of his undeserved triumph, was now a ticking time bomb. Mom stepped forward, her smile gone, replaced by an expression of grim satisfaction. He's not bluffing, Grandpa. Robert spent months on this. He knows every inch of that car. Grandpa stared at me, his face a mixture of shock and profound sadness. The realization of the depth of my resentment, the magnitude of my betrayal, finally registered. The justice I had craved was now delivered, raw and undeniable. Mark scrambled to his feet, a desperate plea in his voice. You wouldn't. You'd be arrested. Maybe, I conceded, a chill running through me, but the car won't be. It'll be a tragic accident. A faulty fuel line, a classic car. Who could ever prove otherwise? The truth hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The years of slights, the constant overshadowing, the final insult of the car, it all culminated in this moment. The bitterness in my heart began to recede, replaced by a strange, unsettling calm. The obsession had run its course. Justice, in its own twisted way, was served. Mark stood frozen, trapped between the humiliating confession of his past deceptions and the terrifying reality of a fiery end. The choice was his. The car, a symbol of his ill-gotten gains, now represented his ultimate downfall. As I watched him, I felt a peculiar emptiness. The revenge I had meticulously planned, the justice I had so desperately sought, had arrived, but the victory felt hollow, tinged with a bittersweet sorrow. The cost of my relentless pursuit had been a part of myself, a piece of my innocence, burned away in the fiery crucible of resentment. The car remained, a silent testament to a family broken, a trust shattered, and a lesson learned at a devastating price.